On the last Sunday of November 2025, the storm that had already torn through 40 states finally reached the lonely stretch of highway where Harold Whitman drove his old silver pickup. At 72, he wasn't afraid of long drives or bad weather. He had worked through both his entire life, but that evening something about the sky felt wrong. The clouds didn't move, they boiled. The wind wasn't cold, it sounded angry. And the radio kept repeating the same warning: whiteout conditions possible. Zero visibility expected within minutes. Harold just wanted to make it home before the worst of it hit. The day after Thanksgiving had always been a quiet ritual for him. Coffee in town, a slow drive back to his cabin, a phone call to his daughter. But as the horizon vanished and the first gust shoved his truck sideways, he realized the storm was no longer something happening on the news. It was right on top of him. When the pickup began sliding on a patch of freezing rain, Harold eased it to the shoulder and stepped out to check the tires. That was his mistake. The wind hit him like a wall. His bad knee, injured decades ago and never the same, buckled instantly. He fell hard, face first into the snow, and before he could push himself up, another blast rolled him onto his side. He tried again. Nothing. His leg wouldn't lift. The storm swallowed the road behind him, erasing the truck, erasing every point of reference. Snow stung his eyes, the ground shook with each gust, and he felt himself sinking into the cold. He wasn't lost in the wilderness. He was lost 20 feet from his own truck, and the storm was just getting started. Tell me from which city you're watching and what time it is there right now. Harold Whitman had lived through enough winters to know the difference between a bad storm and a dangerous one. But this wasn't just a winter front rolling over the Midwest. This was the same system that had already shut down airports across the East Coast, buried small towns in the Rockies, and left thousands stranded after Thanksgiving. Out here, on a nearly empty rural highway, it felt even bigger, even closer, even meaner. He had always prided himself on being careful. His daughter used to joke that he checked the weather more times a day than he checked his phone. But caution only helps before the moment things go wrong, and Harold's moment came the second his knee gave out. Now lying in the growing whiteout, he could barely tell where the sky ended and the ground began. His truck was somewhere behind him, or to the left. Or maybe it had already disappeared completely under the blowing snow. The wind screamed against the pavement, turning flakes into needles that cut across his cheeks. His hands were numb, his breath sharp, his thoughts scattered by the cold. He wasn't running from the storm. The storm had caught him. And now, all he could do was try to survive the next few minutes, because that's all the storm wanted from him. Harold Whitman lay half-turned in the snow, his right knee twisted under him, his left leg shaking from the effort of trying to lift his own weight. The storm roared across the highway as if it wanted to erase every trace of the world he knew. Snow slammed sideways into his coat, filling the folds, creeping down his collar, gathering in the crook of his elbow. No matter how tightly he clenched his fists, he couldn't keep the feeling in his fingers. A lifetime ago, 40 years, maybe more, that knee had been injured in a fall from a ladder while he was working maintenance at the county school. A stupid mistake, he always said. Too much pride, not enough patience. Surgery fixed what it could, age did the rest. Some days it was stiff, some days it throbbed, and once in a while it simply folded beneath him. But never like this. Never so fast. Never when he truly needed it. He tried again to push himself upright, planting one palm into the snow and lifting with his left leg. His shoulder rose a few inches before another violent gust crashed into him. The wind spun him, rolled him like driftwood, and slammed him flat against the ice. His chest struck the ground with a grunt, knocking the air from his lungs. He stayed there for a moment, not by choice, but because he couldn't find the breath to move. The world around him was white, not peaceful like a snowfall, but chaotic, boiling, alive. The flakes were big, sharp, heavy. They clung to his eyelashes and blurred everything into a shifting, colorless void. He turned his head toward where he thought the truck should be. Nothing, just white. "Come on," he muttered, though he couldn't hear his own voice over the storm. He needed a direction. Any direction. The truck had warmth, a heater, the radio, his phone charging in the cup holder, food in the glove compartment, water bottles in the passenger seat. All the small, simple things that meant survival. He could have sworn he'd only taken a few steps from it, maybe 10, 15 at most, but the storm devoured distance. What was seconds ago 10 feet now looked like a mile of nothing. A blinding sheet of snow swept over him, forcing him to drop his head. When he opened his eyes again, his tracks were already disappearing beneath a fresh layer. Every trace of where he'd come from was erasing itself in real time. He needed to think. He needed a plan. He reached for the ground, grabbed a handful of snow, and squeezed. Cold shot up his arm, but it helped him focus. He shifted his weight, trying to drag himself backward, toward what he believed was the shoulder of the road. His elbows dug into the snow as he pulled his body 1 inch at a time. The movement was slow, agonizingly slow, but it was something. After a few feet, he stopped to rest. His heartbeat thumped hard against his ribs. He blinked rapidly, rubbing snow from his brow. Somewhere deep beneath the howl of the wind, he thought he heard the faint creak of metal, maybe the truck's door being battered by gusts, maybe his imagination. He forced himself to continue, pull, shift, push with his left leg, drag the right one behind him. The pain in his knee sharpened with every movement, and Harold winced, teeth clenched, breath trembling. He was moving at a pace that felt humiliating, like a wounded animal, but it was the only way he could move. He paused again, lifting his head just enough to scan the storm. Nothing recognizable. No shape. No lights. No shadows. The storm ate the world and left only motion. Waves of white. Walls of white. A sky of white. A memory flickered. His daughter, Rosie, telling him before Thanksgiving not to drive during the storm. "Dad, just stay home this year. We can video call. You don't need to drive through that mess." He had laughed it off. "It'll be fine, sweetheart. They always exaggerate these things." They hadn't exaggerated anything. Not this time. A gust slammed into him again, and Harold felt his body sliding sideways, rolling slightly. He gripped at the ice beneath him, trying to anchor himself. This wasn't wind. This was a force trying to carry him away. He pressed his head down until the gust passed, then resumed dragging himself forward. At last, after what felt like an hour but was likely only a minute or two, his hand brushed against something solid. Pavement. Bare, exposed pavement where the snow had momentarily failed to cling. He wasn't on the shoulder. He had somehow crawled into the middle of the road. "Damn," he whispered, suddenly aware of how vulnerable that made him. If another car tried to inch through the storm, if a snowplow came through blind, he forced himself to move faster, pull with the arms, push with the good leg, drag the bad one inch by inch. The cold was beginning to seep into his bones, not just the numbness of exposed skin. This was deeper, more dangerous. His jaw trembled uncontrollably. His breath shortened, became shallow. He blinked slowly, his thoughts drifting in and out like weak radio static. He needed shelter. He needed warmth. He needed to get off this open stretch before the storm finished what it had started. A sudden flash of movement caught his eye, at least he thought it did. A faint dark shape, maybe. The truck, a sign, a tree. He lifted his head, squinting through the barrage of snow. The shape flickered, disappeared, reappeared. He angled his body toward it and dragged himself forward. 5 feet, 3, 2. His hand hit something flat and cold, metal. Smooth metal. He exhaled in relief. He'd found something. But as he brushed away the snow with the side of his arm, he realized the truth. It wasn't the truck. It was a guardrail. The truck wasn't anywhere near him. He had been crawling the wrong way. Harold gripped the guardrail hard, pressing his forehead against it as he tried to steady his breath. The metal was freezing, but it grounded him. It reminded him he hadn't drifted into the open fields. He was still on the road, still somewhere he could be found. But if he was this disoriented already, how long until he couldn't tell which direction was which? The storm roared again, almost as if mocking him. Harold forced himself upright onto his elbows. He wasn't giving up. Not here. Not tonight. Not 20 feet from the truck he couldn't even see anymore. He closed his eyes, exhaled a shaky breath and began crawling again. Along the guardrail this time, praying it would eventually lead him back. Harold clung to the guardrail as if it were the last solid thing left in the world. The metal was icy under his palms, biting into his skin. But it gave him a direction, something straight, something fixed, something that didn't disappear every time the wind changed. He angled his shoulder against it and began inching forward, dragging his injured knee behind him like dead weight. The storm showed no mercy. Snow hammered his back in violent bursts, rolling in waves that blurred the road into a shifting white ocean. The guardrail was the only anchor he had. Without it, he would have been swallowed whole. He pulled himself another foot forward, then another, fighting to keep his breath steady. His knee throbbed sharp and hot, then numb, then sharp again. He tried to ignore it. Pain meant he was still alive. The wind screamed down the highway, sounding almost alive, howling, rising, dipping, echoing against the empty fields. Harold had lived in that region his whole life, and he'd never heard a storm sound like this. It wasn't weather. It felt like something else, something that had crossed half the country just to tear through this stretch of forgotten asphalt. He paused, leaning his head against the guardrail while he caught his breath. Snow stung his eyelids. His vision blurred. The cold was crawling deeper, past his coat, past his thermal shirt, past muscle and bone. His fingers were losing sensation, his toes too. But he couldn't stop. Stopping was a slow death. He forced himself forward again, inch by inch. At some point, he didn't know how long, his hand brushed against a bolted plate in the guardrail. A join, a connection point. He knew the layout of this road. If he was where he thought he was, that joint meant he was approaching a curve. If he followed the guardrail around the bend, he might catch sight of his truck again. Or he might drift farther from it. The storm made every direction feel wrong. He tried to listen, really listen, for anything beyond the storm. A horn, a distant engine, human voices, anything. But the wind drowned it all. He kept moving. His breaths came out ragged and thin, little white clouds torn away instantly by the gale. His arms shook from exertion. Each pull forward felt like lifting a block of concrete. His left leg burned from doing all the work. His right leg dragged limply, clunking against the ice every few feet. He thought of Rosie, her voice, the soft way she said, "Dad," the worry she never managed to hide. She had begged him not to drive that day, begged. She would never forgive herself if something happened. And Harold, stubborn as he was, had laughed it off. Now he wasn't laughing. He was fighting to stay conscious. A sudden gust slammed into him hard enough to knock his chest into the guardrail. He gripped the metal, gasping as snow rose around him in a swirling column. It spun so thick and fast that he could barely see his own hands. He lowered his head, tucked his chin, and held on until the wind eased. When he looked up again, the shape, his truck, a shadow, anything, was still gone. He moved again. Time warped. Minutes felt like hours. The storm carved away any sense of progress. He couldn't tell if he was moving 10 feet or 1. He couldn't tell if the guardrail was guiding him or mocking him. His thoughts drifted to strange places, memories from decades ago, smells and sounds from childhood winters, fragments of conversations long forgotten. That was dangerous. Hypothermia blurred the mind. He shook his head sharply, clearing the fog. Focus. Just follow the guardrail. At last, after an eternity of crawling, he reached the curve. He knew he had. He could feel the rail bending beneath his hand. He pressed his body close to it and rounded the corner, lifting his head in the hope, any hope, that the truck might reappear through the white haze. Nothing. Only the endless, blinding storm. But then, something changed. A new sound. A low hum, faint at first, then growing louder, vibrating through the guardrail into his bones. A snowplow. Harold's breath caught. The hum grew, deepened, transformed into a grinding roar. It was coming fast. Way too fast for a storm like this. Snowplow operators often plowed blind during whiteouts, trusting the road markers and luck. And he was in the middle of the storm, crawling inches from the highway. He waved an arm toward the road, but the wind swallowed the gesture whole. He tried shouting, but his voice didn't carry an inch. Panic surged through him. If the plow was on the right side of the road, it would miss him. But if it drifted left even slightly, the massive blade could slice through him before the driver even realized. He had to move. He had to get off the road. He rolled onto his stomach, planting his elbows into the snow, and pushed with everything he had left. His knee screamed, his ribs ached, his vision flickered. But he crawled faster than he had all night, dragging himself toward the far side of the guardrail. The rumble grew louder, too loud. The air vibrated, the snow shook under him. He reached the base of the rail, but the plow was almost on him. He grabbed the top bar, pulled himself up just enough to swing his bad leg over, and failed. Pain shot up his thigh, dropping him back into the snow. He tried again, gritting his teeth so hard his jaw creaked. His fingers slipped. The metal was coated in ice. His gloves were stiff and soaked. The plow roared closer. One more try. He pulled. He heaved. He forced the leg over the rail, ignoring the agony that tore through him. Then he threw his upper body after it and collapsed on the far side, just as the snowplow blasted past in a storm of lights and noise. Snow exploded around him. The blades scraped sparks off the pavement. The engine's roar drowned everything, and the driver never saw him. Harold lay shivering in the snow, staring at the sky he could barely see. If he had been 2 feet closer to the road, he would have been gone, completely. His heart pounded, but relief washed over him slowly, warm at first, then frighteningly cold as the adrenaline faded. He needed to move again, but his body wouldn't respond. His limbs felt heavy, detached. His breaths were shallow. His thoughts flickered like a dying bulb. He wasn't safe. He wasn't saved. He was just not dead yet. He curled slightly, trying to conserve warmth, but the cold pushed in deeper. He felt it settling into his chest, spreading into his spine. He had one thought left, one that kept breaking through the numbness. You can't sleep. Not here, not now, keep moving. But his eyes closed anyway, just for a moment, and the world dimmed. The storm took advantage. It pressed down. It whispered for him to stop fighting. Harold forced his eyes open again, gasping. He wasn't done. Not yet. He gripped the guardrail again and began pulling himself forward, half frozen, half conscious, praying that somewhere ahead, somewhere through this blinding white hell, was the truck he had lost, the warmth he needed, the one chance he had left. And he kept crawling. Harold couldn't remember the last time his body had felt this heavy. Every movement seemed to drain what little warmth he had left, and every breath felt thinner than the one before. The guardrail had become his lifeline, cold, merciless, but steady. It pulled him forward when nothing else in his body wanted to obey. The snowplow had shaken something loose inside him, not just panic, but a realization. No one was coming back for him. No driver in this storm would ever notice a man collapsed on the far side of the railing. No patrol car could see more than a few feet ahead. No neighbor would be out here checking on stranded vehicles. If he wanted to live, he had to find his truck again. He had to make it back to warmth before the cold erased him completely. He dragged himself another foot, then paused, panting. His knee throbbed like a heartbeat of its own, sharp pulses that made his whole leg twitch uncontrollably. He pressed a trembling hand against it, trying to steady it, but pain roared back instantly. "Come on, old man," he whispered through chattering teeth. "Move. Just move." Snow piled over his shoulders and down his back, weighing him down like blankets made of ice. He had to keep brushing it off every few minutes just to keep his limbs from freezing in place. His coat, thick, warm, reliable, was useless now. The storm gnawed through every layer he had. He blinked hard to clear his vision. The world was shrinking into a tunnel, white on the edges, fading to black in the center. He tried blinking again. The tunnel stayed. A bad sign. A very bad sign. He kept crawling. Minutes or hours passed in stuttering fragments. He remembered moving, then stopping, then dragging himself again. The guardrail bent slightly inward at some point, curving toward a small drainage ditch. Harold recognized it. He had driven this road 1,000 times. He knew every dip, every curve. If he was here, then the truck should have been 50, maybe 60 feet behind him. But had he crawled that far? He couldn't tell. Time didn't work right anymore. Distance didn't make sense. He pulled again, using all his remaining strength, and managed to drag himself onto a patch of rough asphalt. The snow had thinned briefly under the wind, revealing a strip of black road like a scar through the white landscape. He pushed himself up onto his elbows, lifting his head, scanning left and right. For a moment, just a heartbeat, he saw something. A dark curve, a familiar shape, a glint of metal under the storm's fury. His truck, or maybe part of it. Harold's breath hitched. Hope surged through him like a shot of adrenaline. He squinted again, trying to keep the shape in sight, but the storm swept a curtain of snow across it, hiding it instantly. "Don't disappear. Don't you disappear on me," he whispered. He angled his body toward where he'd seen the shadow, and started crawling again, faster now, fueled by desperation, fear, and the faintest spark of hope. His hands slapped the ground, numb and shaking. His elbows burned from the friction of ice scraping through the fabric of his sleeves. His left leg pushed unevenly, his boot sliding backward with each gust. His right leg felt like a dead branch, stiff and foreign and useless. He crawled anyway. The shadow reappeared, closer this time, bigger. He could almost make out the rear bumper, half covered in snow. Relief washed over him so suddenly he almost sobbed. But then his body betrayed him. He stopped moving, not because he wanted to, because he couldn't. His arms buckled, his chest collapsed onto the snow. His vision blurred again, darker this time. The thin tunnel narrowed into a pinhole. He could hear his heartbeat pounding in his ears, a slow, heavy, dragging rhythm. "No, no. Not now," he begged, blinking against the fading light. He tried pushing himself up. His arms trembled violently, then gave out. His face hit the snow. He tried again and again, each attempt weaker than the last. The cold was winning. He could feel it, deep inside, not just on his skin, but in his core. His breaths came shallow and slow, and a terrifying peace washed over him, a warmth even like sinking into a bath. Hypothermia's final trick, the seduction of rest. His eyelids fluttered. He couldn't see his truck anymore. He couldn't hear the storm. The world was turning quiet. Then something moved inside him, a memory, not of fear, of love. Rosie, her voice, soft and warm. "Dad, please don't drive in that storm." He imagined her crying at the thought of losing him out here. He imagined her reading the news in the morning, man found frozen near his truck, and blaming herself for not insisting harder. He couldn't do that to her. Not after everything she had already lost. Not after everything she had given him. "Move," he whispered, though his lips barely formed the word. "Come on, Harold, move." He planted his left hand in the snow and pushed. Nothing. He tried again. A twitch, again. A tremble, again. His elbow locked, holding him up for a single, beautiful second. He dragged his right leg forward, forcing it to respond, grunting through the pain. Snow filled his mouth as he tilted forward, gagging on the cold, but he kept moving. 2 feet, 1 foot, half a foot. And then, at last, his hand hit metal. His truck's tailgate. Harold exhaled a sob of relief. He pressed his forehead against the cold surface, letting the reality of it settle into his bones. He'd made it. He'd actually made it. But he wasn't safe yet. The truck was snow-packed. The door might be frozen shut. The heater would take minutes to warm up. He might still pass out before getting inside. He forced himself to slide sideways along the bumper until his hand found the door handle. He gripped it. He pulled. Nothing. He tried again, harder. Still nothing. He tightened his grip, summoned every last flicker of strength left in his frozen body, and yanked one final time. The door cracked open, just an inch. But an inch was enough. He wedged his fingers into the gap, pulled hard, and the door swung out against the wind. Warm air didn't greet him, only darkness and cold. But it was shelter. It was hope. Harold dragged himself up by the steering wheel, collapsing half into the driver's seat, half onto the floor. Snow spilled everywhere. His boots dangled outside. His hands shook uncontrollably as he slammed the door shut. He wasn't warm, he wasn't stable, he wasn't out of danger, but he was inside. And he was alive. For now. CTA Emotional. If you've ever felt that terrifying moment when your body didn't answer back, share it in the comments. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone. Harold sat slumped in the driver's seat, barely able to hold himself upright. Snow clung to every fold of his coat, melting slowly and seeping into the fabric. His breathing came out in thin, unsteady puffs that fogged the inside of the windshield. Each exhale felt weaker than the last. He reached for the ignition with trembling fingers. The keys slipped once, twice, before he managed to hook them between his knuckles. He twisted. Click. A sluggish grind. Another click. Silence. The battery was nearly frozen. Harold shut his eyes and tried again. Click, slow crank, another drag of the starter, then nothing. Come on, come on, he whispered through lips that barely moved. He twisted the key again, but this time the starter didn't even try. Just a dull click, like the heartbeat of a dying machine. The heater wouldn't save him. Not like this, not tonight. He let his head fall back against the seat, breath trembling. The truck wasn't warm, but it was shelter. A thin barrier between him and the storm that wanted to finish what it had started. But without heat, he wasn't much better off than he had been outside. His limbs felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. He slapped his hands against his thighs to wake them, but the pain didn't come. Not a good sign. He needed warmth, movement, circulation. He forced one hand to the dashboard. He felt nothing. Not the texture of the old cracked plastic. Not the cold. Just pressure, like pushing through fog. He couldn't stay like this. With difficulty, he leaned forward and dragged himself toward the passenger side. He opened the glove compartment, fumbling through old receipts, maps, napkins, and tools, until his hand brushed something soft. A blanket, thin, worn, but a blanket. He pulled it out and shook off the dust. It wouldn't stop the cold, but it might slow it down. He draped it over his shoulders, tucking it around his chest and legs as best he could. His fingers barely responded. He needed to think, needed a plan. But his thoughts came slow, sticky and sluggish, like syrup in winter. Warmth. He needed warmth. His eyes drifted toward the back seat. A toolbox, a thermos, a spare coat. He reached for the coat, twisting awkwardly to grab it. His muscles protested. His knee flared with pain, but he pulled the coat onto his lap and wrestled one sleeve over his arm, then the other. Layer after layer. He added whatever he could find. A flannel shirt from under the seat, a second pair of gloves stuffed in the console, a scrap of fabric from an old seat cover. He wrapped everything around himself like armor against the cold pressing in. But even layered up, he could feel the temperature dropping. His breath trembled, his eyelids drooped. He fought the urge to curl up and let the darkness take him. Stay awake, Harold. He tapped his cheek with numb fingers, shook his head, pulled in a deeper breath, coughing as the cold stung his lungs. Focus. Stay awake. His phone. Where was his phone? He remembered plugging it into the charger before stepping out to check the tires. It should have been in the cup holder. He reached for it, but the charger cable swung uselessly, empty at the end. He must have knocked it out when he collapsed into the truck. Panic pricked his chest, but he forced himself to breathe slowly. The phone had to be somewhere in the footwell. He leaned forward, patting blindly around the pedals and floor mats until his fingers brushed something rectangular. His phone. He pulled it up, hands shaking so violently he almost dropped it. The screen lit up when he pressed the side button. Battery. 2%. Damn it, he whispered. No signal, not surprising, but maybe he could call 911 anyway. Sometimes calls went through even with one bar, or none. He pressed the emergency dial. The screen loaded, and loaded, and loaded, then froze, then died. Black screen, dead phone. Harold let the device fall into his lap. He stared at it for a long moment before tucking it inside his coat to keep it from freezing solid. He wasn't sure why. Maybe out of habit. Maybe because it felt like the last thread connecting him to the world outside this storm. He needed another plan. His eyes drifted to the back window. Snow piled against it, climbing higher with each gust. Soon the truck would be buried. He wouldn't see the sky or the storm or the road. No one would see him either. He swallowed hard. Think, Harold. Think. He forced himself to look around the cabin, the tools, the supplies, anything he might use. Then he saw it, a small portable battery pack, one he used for charging his GPS when driving through remote areas. It sat wedged between the seat and the console. Hope sparked inside him. He grabbed it, fumbling to turn it on. A red light blinked weakly, then another. It had power. Not much, but enough. He plugged his phone in. The phone vibrated faintly. The screen lit up again, 1%. He waited, eyes fixed on the icon as if staring harder would make it charge faster. Every second counted. Every second meant deeper cold, but the percent ticked upward, slow but moving. 1%, 2%, 3%. When it hit 5%, he dialed 911 again. This time, it rang. He held the phone close, listening desperately through the static. After a long pause, a faint voice cut through. 911. What's your emergency? He tried to answer, but his teeth chattered so violently the words came out broken. Storm, I'm stuck. My truck. Sir, I need your location. I don't know. Highway. He coughed. The cold tore into his lungs again. Stay on the line, sir. We're tracking your signal. Keep talking to me. Harold tried. He really did. But the world kept flickering in front of him. The phone felt heavy in his hand. His vision blurred again. Sir? Sir? Stay awake. Help is on the way. He nodded weakly, though she couldn't see him. The warmth of the truck's interior, meager as it was, began to lull him towards sleep. He wasn't warm, just less cold. But less cold was enough to confuse the brain into wanting rest. His eyes drooped. Sir? Are you still with me? He forced his eyelids open. Yeah, he breathed. Good. Keep talking. Stay awake. Tell me anything. Anything. He tried thinking of something to say. Daughter, he whispered. Okay, tell me about her. He tried. For a moment his voice steadied. He talked about Rosie, her stubbornness, her laugh, her worry. Talking kept him conscious. Barely. But then the phone vibrated. Low battery. 1%. No, he whispered. The phone died. Dark again. Silent again. Harold stared at the dead screen, feeling every thread of hope slip through his fingers. He was alone, and the storm wasn't finished with him. Harold stared at the dead phone, its dark screen reflecting the faint outline of his frozen face. The tiny warmth the device had given him was fading quickly. The portable battery pack blinked once, weak, red, before shutting off completely. No more chances, no more calls, no more connection to anyone outside the truck. Silence pressed in. Not the silence of a quiet room, but the suffocating, heavy silence that comes after a battle, the eye of a storm that hasn't finished what it started. Snow hammered the roof, the windows, the wheel wells. The truck creaked under the weight gathering on top. Every gust made it vibrate slightly, like an exhale from a giant creature. Harold leaned back, shivering uncontrollably now. His body twitched with every breath. His vision blurred in and out, each blink longer than the one before. He knew the signs. Hypothermia wasn't just setting in, it was settling deep. If sleep came now, it wouldn't be sleep. It would be surrender. He forced his fingers to move. He slapped his palms against his legs again, but he couldn't feel the impact. His fingertips were white. Not pale. White. He flexed them, but they barely obeyed. He needed another heat source. Anything at all. His eyes drifted toward the toolbox on the back seat again. There had to be something. Some spark, some chemical hand warmer packet, some leftover emergency candle he'd forgotten about. He twisted in the seat, groaning as his stiff body resisted him, and reached into the back. Tools, wrenches, a flashlight, a few old cloth rags, a sealed can of de-icer, a small first aid kit. He grabbed the flashlight. Clicking it on felt like lifting a brick. A dim beam flickered to life, weak but steady. He aimed it into the toolbox and scanned every inch. Then he saw it. A small orange plastic container shaped like a pill bottle. Hand warmers, the disposable kind you shook to activate. His breath hitched. He fumbled the bottle open, shaking it so clumsily that 3 packets spilled onto the floor. He grabbed one, tore the wrapper with his teeth and shook it between his palms. At first it felt like nothing. Then, slowly, so slowly he thought he imagined it, a faint warmth bloomed. Not heat, not safety, but a spark. He pressed the packet to his chest, right against the base of his throat, where large blood vessels lay close to the skin. He tucked a second one under his armpit, a third against the inside of his wrist. He closed his eyes and held them there. 1 minute, 2, 5. The warmth stayed faint, but real. He wasn't going to freeze. Not yet. Still shaking, he fumbled open the glove compartment again and pulled out the granola bar he kept there for long drives. He hadn't eaten since morning. He tore the wrapper, took a bite and winced. His body resisted swallowing. Cold made digestion harder, but he forced himself to eat the entire thing. He needed fuel. He kept the hand warmers pressed against him and leaned back against the seat, breathing shallowly. The storm outside raged harder, pounding against the truck like fists. He could hear snow sliding down the windshield as it piled higher. Then, a sound. Not the storm. Not an engine. Something softer. A vibration. He looked down. The phone, still dead, was vibrating faintly in his coat pocket. Except, it wasn't the phone. It was him. His body. Tremors rippled through him uncontrollably, violent and uneven. He curled slightly, pulling the blanket and extra coats tighter. His teeth clacked together. His breaths came in quick, panicked bursts. Stay awake, Harold. Stay awake. He blinked hard. His eyelids dragged. His vision dimmed. He tried saying his daughter's name out loud. Rosie. But the word was slurred, barely audible. The storm outside had taken on a strange pattern, howling, then quieting, then howling again. Almost rhythmic, almost soothing. No, that was the danger. Hypothermia made everything sound gentle at the end. He shook his head violently, slapping his cheeks with his numb hands. He needed pain, needed sensation, needed anything that kept him awake. But the world kept slipping. His head dropped forward. His breath slowed. Darkness closed in, then a sound cut through the storm. A faint, distant beep, then another, then a low hum. Harold's eyes drifted open, though he barely understood why. Lights. Faint, shifting lights through the snow outside his windshield. At first he thought it was the wind playing tricks, but then he saw it again, yellow strobes sweeping across the storm, disappearing, then reappearing from another angle. A plow? A car? No, those lights were different. Warmer, softer, pulsing, emergency lights. His breath hitched. Help. They found him. They actually found him. He tried to lift his hand toward the window, but only managed to brush the glass. Outside, the lights grew brighter. A shadow passed in front of them, a person. Then another. Voices. Faint, muffled, impossible to make out over the storm, but definitely human. A flashlight beam hit the windshield. "We got him!" a voice shouted, distorted by the wind. Harold's eyes filled with tears. He didn't have the strength to smile, but somewhere inside, something loosened. Relief, maybe. Or gratitude. Or the simple knowledge that he hadn't died out here alone. Someone pounded on the truck's door. "Sir, can you hear me? Open the door." Harold tried. He really tried. His hand moved an inch, then stopped. The door handle jerked from the outside. Once, twice. Then, click. The door swung open. Cold air blasted in for a moment, but then warm hands grabbed him, gloved, strong, efficient. "Sir, stay with me. His temp is dropping fast. He's conscious, barely. Wrap him. Wrap him now." A thermal blanket enveloped him. Hands lifted him, steady and urgent. A mask pressed against his face. Warm air flowed in. Someone squeezed his shoulder, grounding him. "You're okay, sir. We've got you. Stay awake. You made it." Harold tried to speak, but the world tilted. His vision blurred again. This time, though, it wasn't the storm pulling him down. It was safety, warmth, human voices. The promise that he would live to see another sunrise. The last thing he felt before slipping into a deep, exhausted sleep was a hand holding his. Firm, reassuring, alive. He had survived the storm that swallowed half the country. He had survived his own failing body. He had survived the night. And now, finally, he could rest. Harold woke up 2 days later in a hospital room, warm air humming softly through the vents and a faint glow of afternoon light pushing through the blinds. His body felt heavy, his thoughts slow, but the warmth, real warmth, wrapped around him like a blanket he never wanted to leave again. A nurse sat beside him, chart in hand, smiling gently when she saw his eyes open. "You're a lucky man, Mr. Whitman," she said. "Another hour out there and your body wouldn't have had the strength to fight anymore." He nodded faintly. His voice cracked when he tried to speak. "Did they call my daughter?" "She's on her way," the nurse said. "She hasn't slept since we told her." Harold closed his eyes, overwhelmed. He remembered the storm swallowing the road, the pain in his knee, the crawling, the darkness. He remembered hearing the rescuers shouting through the wind, and he remembered promising himself, somewhere between fear and hope, that if he survived, he would never again ignore the people who loved him. When Rosie finally walked into the room and wrapped her arms around him, Harold whispered, "I'm here. I made it. I'm sorry." Some storms leave scars, but they also leave lessons. What moment in your life taught you resilience when everything felt impossible? Share it below. I'll be reading.